The door creaked open with a haunting familiarity, each sound stirring memories I thought I'd tucked away. 5 years, a lifetime ago, or at least it felt that way. As I crossed the threshold, the house seemed to whisper old secrets, stories of the girl who once sought refuge here before she became something more, something her family refused to see. I stood in the hallway, my chest tightening as echoes of laughter and arguments intertwined in my mind. Yet here I was again, a woman forged anew by the fires of duty and perseverance, bearing a secret rank that commanded respect everywhere but here, Colonel Cassandra. But somehow, they still saw only the daughter who had left. "Cassandra, you're back!" My mother's voice carried from the kitchen, brimming with a joy born from ignorance. As she appeared in the doorway, her eyes searched mine for something familiar, something unchanged. "How's your little career going?" she asked, her words as sharp as ever and oblivious to their sting. A small part of me cringed at little, knowing how many lives depended on my decisions every day. Could they not feel the gravity of what lay beneath my skin? "It's been quite an experience," I replied softly, fighting to mask the blend of pride and frustration thrumming through me. As we moved into the sitting room for tea, a ritual so mundane it seemed surreal, I caught my father's eye over his paper. He gave a curt nod, respect wrapped tightly in indifference. But my heart held an unwavering resolve. This time would be different. They might never acknowledge me as Colonel Cassandra, but I knew who I was. And perhaps that's all that ever mattered. With each sip of tea and pregnant pause in conversation, I felt the tide within me shift. The distance between who they thought I was and who I'd become growing ever clearer. What they couldn't see wouldn't stop me anymore. It was time to claim my space in this world, even if only in silence. It's strange how a single moment can crystallize years of neglect, isn't it? The minute I walked through the door, I could hear the clatter of pans in the kitchen and the familiar voice that seemed forever caught in a loop of Derek-centered life. "Did you pick up Derek's dry cleaning?" My mother's voice rang out abruptly, cutting through the air like an unexpected gust on a calm day. No, hello. No, how was your day? Just another chore revolving around my brother, as if I were merely an extension of his existence. I paused in the hallway, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. It was odd how, over time, silence had become louder than the words ever could be. I took a breath, steeling myself for what I knew was coming. This wasn't about dry cleaning or chores. It was about being seen, or rather not being seen at all. "Yeah, I did." My voice came out steady, though inside there was a storm brewing, a familiar ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. I wanted to say more, to scream out that I was here too, that I mattered. But instead, I walked towards the kitchen where she stood with her back to me, her focus unwavering from her tasks. In those moments, I realized something quietly profound. I'd been speaking in whispers, while everyone else shouted over me for far too long. A decision rippled through me, an unspoken vow to change this narrative where my worth wasn't measured against Derek's needs anymore. "Thanks," she replied absently as she turned to stir something on the stove. But it wasn't thanks for me. It was thanks for him, as invisible as ever in plain sight. Yet beneath that invisibility lay a burgeoning resolve. Maybe today wouldn't be different for her, but it would be for me. Because sometimes change starts not in grand gestures, but in small rebellions noticed only by our own heart. And so began the quiet revolution within me. A new chapter unfolding silently, yet powerfully. It's funny how one phone call can unravel years of carefully built self-worth. Guess what, Cassandra? Derek just got promoted to vice president at his company. My mother's voice rang with a kind of pride that I hadn't heard in years. For a moment, I tried to share her excitement, imagining the joy of having a sibling achieve something remarkable. But then, reality set in. Her enthusiasm wasn't for me. As she rattled on about Derek's accomplishments, each word sharp and glistening like shards of glass, I felt my heart sink deeper into a familiar pit of insignificance. "He's done so well for himself," she continued, oblivious to the growing silence on my end. It was as if her words were meant to remind me of the unacknowledged achievements in my own life. I wanted to scream down the line, "What about me, Mom? What about all I've achieved?" But instead my lips remained sealed. The protest stuck somewhere between my heart and throat. It was always Derek, the golden child who could do no wrong. My successes felt like little more than shadows cast by his dazzling light. Yet inside me burned a quiet resolve, a determination not to let this moment define me. "Congratulations," I finally managed to say, my voice steady but distant, hoping it masked the storm inside. My mother barely noticed as she continued praising Derek's milestones. Hanging up the phone felt like lifting a weight from my chest. In that silence, I found clarity and a promise to myself. I would find recognition beyond her blind spots, crafting a path where I was seen and celebrated for who I am, not just as someone's sister. That call left an indelible mark, one that fueled my journey forward. A journey where I'd be more than just another number in someone else's success story. As I pushed open the door to my childhood bedroom, a wave of nostalgia mixed with bitterness washed over me. The air felt heavy, almost like stepping back in time, where everything around was untouched by the years, frozen in a past that no longer fit who I'd become. Each corner of the room echoed with whispers of my younger self, dreams scattered across floral wallpaper and posters of bygone idols. I stood there, surveying every inch. The bedspread still bore the same faded pattern, restless memories tucked beneath its folds. My eyes lingered on the shelves, crammed with remnants of innocence. Trophies from long-forgotten sporting events, books dog-eared and gathering dust. But something was missing, a part of me conspicuously absent from this shrine. My gaze swept the room again, searching for signs of acknowledgement. Any nod to the woman I had worked so hard to become. There were no framed certificates celebrating my hard-earned military achievements, no medals gleaming with the pride and sacrifice they represented. In their place, a gallery of childhood mementos that seemed to matter more than the person I had fought to be. It was as if my accomplishments had vanished into some hidden void within these walls that refused to acknowledge my growth. "Is this all you see when you look at me?" I found myself whispering into the silence, hoping for an answer from anyone who might care or even notice. The room offered none, just a taunting echo. I felt a surge, the familiar pull between who I was and who I am now. A battle many never see but feel deeply every day. It was here, amidst the relics of yesteryear's victories and overlooked milestones, that I realized recognition doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it must come from within ourselves. The memory is as vivid now as it was then. I can still feel the weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on my shoulders like an invisible burden. Their carefully laid plans for me were like chains, binding me to a future they deemed perfect. A future in business school that promised stability and prestige. But the closer I got to that path, the more suffocated I felt, like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. I remember sitting across from them at the dining table. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock, each tick echoing like a countdown to what I had to reveal. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice quivering but resolute. "I've decided to join the military." Silence stretched across the room like a chasm. Their disappointment was palpable, an unspoken verdict heavy in the air. My father was the first to speak. "Why throw away your future?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration and disbelief. My mother's eyes reflected her disappointment. She looked away, as if avoiding contact would undo my words. Inside, my heart waged a war between guilt and determination. But this decision wasn't made lightly or out of rebellion. It was born out of a desire to find purpose beyond expectations others set for me. The military called to something deeper within me, a chance to serve, to grow beyond the confines of what had been planned. Their silence returned, this time heavier than before. In that moment, I realized something crucial. Sometimes choosing your own path means stepping away from those you love most. It doesn't erase their disappointment or change their dreams for you overnight. It demands courage and patience until they see who you're meant to become. This was just one battle in a larger war for self-discovery that lay ahead. There are moments in life when the truth emerges with such power that it shifts the very ground beneath your feet. As I stood before a room full of eyes, each pair expectant and curious, I knew this was one of those moments. My heart pounded, each beat echoing the significance of what I was about to reveal. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady, but charged with an undercurrent of emotion that had been building for months. "I am proud to announce that I am now the Pentagon liaison for the $1.2 billion defense contract." A murmur spread across the room as faces registered surprise, admiration, and something else. An unspoken curiosity about my connection to this colossal undertaking. What they didn't know was how deeply personal this contract was to me. A flicker of old resentment tried to surface, a shadow from years ago, when my father's influence loomed large over every decision in my life. "Oh, Cassandra, she's just riding her dad's coattails," they used to whisper. But today, their whispers meant nothing. Standing here in a position that symbolized both professional triumph and personal redemption felt surreal. I took a deep breath, allowing myself a moment to savor the sweet taste of vindication. My father's company might be involved, yes, but this role wasn't handed to me on a silver platter. It was wrestled from the jaws of doubt and defied expectations. "Now," I continued, locking eyes with those who once doubted me. "As we move forward with this partnership, rest assured that integrity and transparency will steer our course together." And there it was, a quiet yet powerful declaration, not just of my authority, but also of independence. No longer just an extension of someone else's legacy. I had forged my own path, a path illuminated by resilience and an unwavering belief in myself. As I stood in the kitchen, absent-mindedly stirring a pot of soup, a strange calm washed over me. Tonight seemed like any other night, yet I knew it was anything but ordinary. Tomorrow would be the day my truth would finally unravel. After years of living in the shadows, pretending, enduring, all while wearing a mask of compliance, Tomorrow's conference would peel away every layer I've hidden beneath. I felt a tight knot in my stomach at the thought. How long had I lived this way? Too long, I whispered to myself. Far too long. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the salt shaker, sprinkling a bit more into the bubbling broth. There was something comforting about cooking. Its predictability contrasted sharply with the chaos that loomed on the horizon. Are you okay? The sudden voice from behind startled me, bringing me back to the present. It was him, my husband, ever oblivious, or perhaps blissfully ignorant of what tomorrow might bring. I nodded, forcing a smile. Just thinking about tomorrow, I replied softly. Hoping he wouldn't press further, he chuckled lightly. You'll do great. His words hung in the air between us, unformed and fragile. Little did he know that his reassurances were empty gestures against a tide of truth waiting to crash over us both. As we sat down to dinner, I couldn't help but glance around our dining room, so full of memories, yet each one now felt laced with irony. Was this really my life? With each bite I took, it was as though I consumed another piece of my past, savoring each moment of deceit that was about to dissolve into reality. Tomorrow's conference wasn't just a meeting. It was liberation disguised as confrontation. And as anxiety and resolve waltzed within me tonight, I knew this lull was merely paving way for an impending storm. As I sat at the dinner table surrounded by so-called family, a familiar feeling of invisibility began to seep into my very bones. The laughter and light clinking of glasses echoed around me. Yet all I could focus on was the gnawing silence that filled every space where my name should have been spoken. To Derek, Aunt Lisa announced with an excitement that felt rehearsed, lifting her glass high. For landing that incredible promotion, what an achievement! Derek's smug smile stretched across his face as everyone raised their glasses in unison. I forced a polite smile as I lifted my own glass, the weight of it reminding me of my own accomplishments, hidden in the shadows of their ignorance. Just last week, I had completed a major project at work, one that had taken months of dedication and sleepless nights. But here I was, completely overlooked. It didn't end there. No sooner had Derek's toast concluded than Uncle Joe turned his attention to Tiffany, my cousin. And let's not forget about Tiffany, he proclaimed with pride swelling in his chest. Accepted into her first-choice university on a full scholarship. Applause erupted around me like fireworks in celebration of everyone but me. Tiffany's cheeks were flushed with delight as she gleefully accepted the praise showered upon her. I sat there silently, tasting bitterness rather than gratitude. Why did they always fail to see me? To see what I have done? Each accolade for someone else was another brick added to the wall that boxed me into this corner of neglect. As they continued chattering away, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, I realized something crucial. Waiting for their validation was like waiting for rain in a desert. It may never come. With this realization came clarity. Perhaps it was time to write my own story, where I'm not just a supporting character, but the lead. This newfound understanding would spark something unstoppable inside of me. His voice cut through the ambient noise like a siren in an otherwise serene sea. I stood at the back of the room, heart pounding in my chest, as Derek regaled the gathering with tales of his supposed triumphs. It was no small feat, he declared, eyes gleaming with counterfeit pride. Leading this military contract project has been challenging, but I've brought it to the brink of success. Each word felt like a slap, My skin prickled with indignation as I tried to maintain my composure. Here he was, taking credit for my work, my late nights, and relentless dedication. The very project I had nurtured from a mere concept into something tangible, a project I oversaw. As Derek continued to weave his fabrications, I could feel the gaze of our colleagues shifting in the room. Some were awestruck by his charisma, while others, those who knew, cast furtive glances my way, their expressions a mix of pity and disbelief. "Don't let him get to you," whispered Megan, one of the few allies I had in this corporate jungle. Her words barely registered over the roaring tide of anger within me. I realized then that silence would only validate his deceitful story. A deep breath steadied me. This wasn't just about recognition. It was about reclaiming my power, my narrative. As if driven by an internal cue, Derek raised his glass for a self-congratulatory toast. That's when I stepped forward. The room hushed, anticipation crackling in the air like static before a storm. "Actually," I began, each syllable slicing through the tension, like a knife through warm butter. "That project is under my supervision." My voice didn't waver. It carried the weight of truth. In that moment, Derek's smile faltered, his bravado crumbling under the scrutiny of reality. It was a family dinner like any other, but the air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken tension that only I seemed to notice. My mother sat across from me, her gaze a calculated mix of warmth and something sharper, something that always managed to slice through my confidence. "So, Cassandra," she began, her voice honeyed yet laced with thorns, "I heard about your recent promotion." My heart swelled briefly, hoping for genuine recognition. But then came the inevitable sting. "Though it's quite a small step up in the grand scheme of things, isn't it?" Her words dripped with the feigned ignorance. But I knew better. In that moment, the room's laughter faded into a dull buzz as my mind raced. Why did every conversation have to feel like a battlefield? I wanted to argue, to defend myself against this invisible attack. But instead, I nodded slightly and forced a smile. The clinking of cutlery on plates resumed around us as if nothing had happened. Inside, however, I could feel the familiar knot tightening in my chest. It wasn't just about my career. It was about years of feeling like I'd never measure up in her eyes. Despite every achievement and accolade I'd earned on my own terms, it was never enough for her. Or maybe just never enough to eclipse whatever expectations she held. Yet amid the tension lay a flicker of resolve growing steadily within me. No longer would I allow these subtle jabs to dictate how I saw myself or my worth. As much as her words stung, they also fueled a quiet determination burning brighter inside me. A determination not just to prove myself to her, but more importantly, to affirm my own value despite her veiled criticisms. As I looked around at the faces of those who loved me unconditionally, I realized that there was a world beyond her judgments. A world where my rank didn't define my success or happiness. And maybe one day soon, she'd see it too. Have you ever felt the sting of being belittled by those who should lift you up? I remember sitting across from my parents, their faces a mixture of disdain and ignorance as they laughed off my life choices. The word instability hung in the air like a verdict, unraveling everything I had fought hard to build, a life that moved me with purpose and duty. "Another move?" my father scoffed, barely hiding his contempt. "When will you settle down for once?" I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. How could I explain the honor and sacrifice tied to my commitments when they saw only chaos and restlessness? My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You can't keep running forever. At some point, you'll have to face reality. Inside me, a storm brewed. Frustration mingling with a deep sense of betrayal. These were my parents. Surely they knew that each move was not a flight from stability, but a step toward something greater, a lifelong pledge to serve. In their eyes, however, every relocation was another rung down the ladder of success they envisioned for me. But what they saw as instability was in truth resilience. With each move came new challenges that molded me into someone capable of adapting, thriving even amidst uncertainty. As silence settled between us, I realized their perception would never mirror my reality unless I chose to redefine it for them. Standing firm in that moment became an act of quiet defiance. I took a deep breath and steadied myself for the confrontation looming ahead. A battle not just for understanding, but for respect. Because if they couldn't see the value in what I do, then maybe it was time I showed them. A steely resolve filled my chest as I prepared to speak again, knowing this time I'd find the courage to articulate the pride and purpose driving each decision I've made. It felt like a punch to the gut, though his words were just air. The military is for people who can't cut it in the real world, Derek sneered, his voice laced with disdain. Those words hung in the air, sharp and cold, slicing through the fragile threads of our relationship. I stood there, stunned, feeling my heart constricting with a familiar ache. How had I missed these red flags before? The man I once thought of as a partner now stood before me, a stranger cloaked in unveiled contempt. For years I'd heard whispers of his dismissive views, but chose to silence them for peace's sake. But this was different. This was direct, personal, reverberating deep within me. Those words struck at the core of my identity, and all that I had worked for and believed in. Do you really see it that way? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady amidst the rising tide of the emotions threatening to engulf me. Inside, my thoughts whirled chaotically. How could he not see the dedication, the sacrifice? His dismissive shrug spoke volumes more than any words could convey. It was clear he had no understanding or appreciation for the strength required to wear that uniform every day. As he turned his back on me, a wave of clarity washed over me. A realization that Derek would never understand or support this part of who I am. And just like that, something within me shifted. I felt my resolve harden like steel forged in fire. No longer would I allow others to define my worth or belittle my choices. Standing taller now, I made a silent vow to myself. From this moment on, I'd surround myself only with those who valued true courage, the kind found both on battlefields and within hearts brave enough to pursue their own path. It's funny how silence can sometimes be more deafening than the loudest noise. Sitting at the dinner table that evening, surrounded by the familiar faces of my family, I felt like a stranger in my own home. My parents were animatedly discussing Derek's recent vacation escapade, their voices filled with admiration and envy for the exotic destinations he'd explored. "Did you see the photos of Derek by that waterfall? Breathtaking!" My mother gushed, her eyes gleaming as she passed her phone to my father. Meanwhile, I sat there, fork in hand, attempting to savor a meal that suddenly seemed tasteless. The room was alive with warmth and laughter, yet I felt a cold distance growing between us. My words seemed to dissolve into the air before they could reach anyone's ears. I wanted to join them in conversation, to share something about my day, or an idea I'd been nurturing in secret. But whenever I tried to speak up, Their attention was miles away. As if on cue, they shifted their focus from Derek's exploits to Tiffany's latest financial success. Tiffany's investments are really paying off, Dad remarked proudly. She's got such talent for this. We're so proud of her wisdom. Mum nodded enthusiastically. Their praises hovered like a halo around Derek and Tiffany, while I sat in shadows. I swallowed hard against the knot growing in my throat, my voice buried beneath layers of unspoken stories and unfulfilled desires. It felt like no matter what I did, it would never shine brightly enough to catch their eye. I wanted to scream, "Notice me! I'm here too." But instead, I smiled tightly and remained silent. A ghost observing life unfold through someone else's lens. In that moment of quiet clarity, I realized whatever path I chose next would have to be one where my own light wouldn't be dimmed by others' brilliance. The night was still, yet my mind was ablaze with thoughts, restless and swirling. I found myself wandering through the dimly lit hallway of our house, seeking solace in the calm that only the night can bring. As I neared the living room, hushed voices trickled into my consciousness, like a bitter reminder of wounds unhealed. "Derek is just phenomenal." My father's voice carried a tone of admiration that cut deeper than any knife could. "He's always been so brilliant at managing everything without faltering." My footsteps halted, heart tightening as if held in an iron grip. Derek, my brother, the golden child who could do no wrong, was once again the center of their world, while I remained an invisible shadow cast by his radiant light. Pressing myself against the cool wall, I listened closer, hoping against hope to hear a mention of me, even just a whisper of acknowledgement for all I'd achieved. But as their conversation continued unabated, it became clear that my efforts had slipped unnoticed under the radar of their affection. "I don't know where he finds the time to help everyone and excel at work." My mother's voice floated through the air like a soft stroke to Derek's already inflated ego. A heavy sigh escaped my lips before I could hold it in. How could they not see? I fought day after day to carve out my own place, striving tirelessly to earn even a fraction of their praise. Standing there, hidden beneath shadows both real and metaphorical, I felt an old resolve stir within me, a fierce determination fueled by years of quiet neglect. If they couldn't see me now, they soon would. This wasn't over. It was merely another chapter in our tangled family saga. With newfound strength coursing through me, I stepped back into the dark corridor. They may remain blind tonight, but one day, they will have no choice but to see. Every uniform tells a story, and mine, it's one of defiance and sheer will. Years ago, I stood in the shadows, dismissed by those who couldn't see beyond their prejudices. They saw a young woman daring to dream big in a world dominated by whispers of doubt and skepticism. But they didn't know the fire that burned inside me. "You'll never make it past basic," they would say with a smirk, their words dripping with condescension. I remember each sideways glance, every undermining comment. Those moments etched themselves into my memory, fueling my resolve to not just meet expectations, but to shatter them. I pushed through each challenge like it was my last, driven by something deeper than ambition. Perhaps vindication, perhaps self-worth. Day by day, I climbed, step by step I forged ahead. The path wasn't easy. It was lined with grueling tests of strength and spirit. Nights were spent wrestling with exhaustion and doubt, wondering if the scars of constant belittlement would ever fade. But there was always this voice within. stronger than any external judgment that whispered, "You are more." It urged me forward when my legs felt like lead and my heart seemed too heavy to lift another inch. Years passed like fleeting moments in hindsight. Now I stand in a room filled with those who once dismissed me, among allies and those who doubted alike, and I wear this rank with pride not just for myself, but for anyone who's been told they're not enough. I am a testament that resilience isn't born from easy victories, but forged in fires of relentless trials and perseverance. Next time you see someone standing alone against the tide, think twice before you judge their journey. Because what seems improbable today becomes unstoppable tomorrow when fueled by unwavering determination. It was one of those nights where the screen seemed to blur into reality, a digital whirl spilling over into my conscience. As I sat alone in the dim glow of my monitor, fatigue pulling at my eyelids, I knew I should have been exhausted. But instead, I felt an electric hum coursing through me, a mix of anxiety and anticipation tingling under my skin. Weeks before, whispers of anomalies had begun to ripple through the team like ghostly echoes. Data streams behaving erratically, unauthorized access attempts, indicators that something sinister lurked just beneath the surface. My instincts nudged at me relentlessly, urging me to dig deeper, like a dog with a bone it couldn't bear to let go. I threw myself into the investigation with relentless determination. Every click and keystroke brought me closer to the truth, peeling back layers of deceit like an onion revealing its pungent core. It was in those long hours that I uncovered it. A massive cyber breach, orchestrated by unseen hands expertly weaving through our systems. This can't be real, I whispered to myself as the extent of the breach unfolded on my screen. A chill ran down my spine, despite the warmth of the room. The night stretched on as I pieced together evidence, every discovery more shocking than the last. By dawn, with coffee long cold by my side and eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, I knew there was no turning back. I had found what others missed, or perhaps feared to confront. When I finally presented my findings, there was a moment, a pause, as heavy as lead in the conference room. Then came a wave of validation, so potent it nearly swept me off my feet. Praise from superiors who recognized not just the gravity of what I'd uncovered, but also my tenacity. That recognition catapulted me forward. It was more than just a promotion. It was a testament to trusting one's intuition and courage in facing down shadows when no one else dared. They say recognition is a mirror reflecting one's worth, yet my own reflection was hidden in shadows, completely invisible to those who should have seen me the most. I stood at the pinnacle of an accomplishment that defied odds and shattered barriers. I had become the youngest colonel in Cyber Command history. My heart swelled with pride, but it was a solitary celebration. Family gatherings were always tense, filled with unspoken judgments and veiled comparisons. Despite every medal I earned, every barrier I broke through, I remained just a whisper in their lives, a shadow cast by siblings deemed more successful in their eyes. How could they not see the battles I'd fought and won? But no matter how hard I tried, my triumphs seemed to disappear into the void of their expectations. I remember the day vividly. A crisp certificate embossed with my new title lay on my desk at work, a tangible testament to years of perseverance and sleepless nights spent decoding threats and protecting secrets. But to my family, it was as if none of it existed. Cyber Command? They'd ask quizzically if I ever dared mention where I worked, brushing it off like dust from an old book. Each dismissal cut deeper than the last, until slowly, amidst their indifference, I realized something profound. Their acknowledgement wasn't what defined me or my success. As much as it stung to be overlooked by those whose opinion once mattered so greatly, this journey had taught me resilience and self-worth that didn't hinge on validation from them. So here I stand, not waiting for cheers or applause, but anchored by an inner strength that shines, even when no one else notices. My victory is mine alone, powerful and unassailable. And perhaps one day they'll see it too. But until then, I've learned to carry my own torch through the darkness they cast upon me. I could feel the weight of the past hanging over me as I approached Pinnacle HQ, a towering fortress of steel and glass, a place I once called my professional haven. Today, it felt different. This wasn't just another day at work. This was a return to reclaim what had been mine all along, beneath layers of betrayal and deceit. As I walked up to the entrance, my heart pounded in rhythm, with my footsteps echoing off the grand marble floors. The air was filled with whispers of anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm. I was no longer the Cassandra who had left this place in pieces. Today, I held a new title that came with its own armor, Colonel Williams. The moment I crossed the threshold, the security team snapped to attention. Colonel Williams. They greeted me with an undeniable respect that warmed my soul and solidified my resolve. For so long, I'd been dismissed, overlooked. But this acknowledgement was more than mere protocol. It was validation of my journey against odds that were meant to break me. "Good morning," I replied, keeping my voice steady, despite the rush of emotions swirling inside. As their eyes followed me down the corridor, I could sense their silent approval, a recognition of strength reclaimed and authority respected. Each step forward shed layers of doubt and fear that had haunted me since I last walked these halls under different circumstances. My thoughts raced back to moments when those same corridors echoed with whispers, mocking my downfall. Yet now, every glance cast in my direction was one of admiration or curiosity, a testament to how far I'd come. Walking through those familiar doors felt like stepping into a new chapter, where every uncertainty transformed into power. With renewed purpose guiding me forward, I silently vowed that no one would ever strip me of who I am again. This was just the beginning. As I stood there, the world around me seemed to hold its breath. There she was, stepping into the room clad in a uniform that carried an air of authority and unspoken stories of resilience. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to process the sight before me. How could this be? How could she, of all people, wear such a badge of honor? Derek, my dear friend who had been with me through thick and thin, couldn't hide his shock either. His eyes widened, reflecting the same disbelief that coursed through my veins. Is this really happening? I thought, struggling to come to terms with this unexpected twist in our narrative. The room felt heavy with unsaid words, each second stretching into eternity as we all absorbed her presence. But it wasn't just us feeling the weight of this moment. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father shift uncomfortably in his seat, his confident demeanor faltering, like a house of cards in a gust of wind. He knew something we didn't. Realization struck me like a cold wave. There was more to this story, hidden layers beneath our feet waiting to unravel. Her presence here wasn't just surprising. It was unnerving for reasons yet undisclosed. Derek whispered under his breath, "What does this mean?" His voice cracked slightly, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile truth hung in the air between us. I swallowed hard, determined not to let fear take root in my heart. This was my reality now. I couldn't afford to look away, nor back down. As her eyes met mine across the room, I saw determination mirrored within them. A silent pact formed between us. We would dig until we unearthed every secret buried beneath smiles and nods. This was only the beginning, the first step into a journey where trust would be tested beyond limits and alliances forged anew amidst shadows long cast by those we trusted most. The anticipation in the air was electric, a crackling energy that seemed to echo the pounding of my heart. I had prepared for this day with meticulous care, rehearsing every word, every possible response. But here I was, standing in the grandiose lobby adorned with cold marble and glass that reflected an empire built on ambition and power. It all came down to this moment. "Cassandra!" a voice called out, slicing through the silence like a knife through butter. It was Shannon Murphy, the CEO whose reputation for both brilliance and ruthless precision preceded her. She approached with an ease that belied the weight of her position. Her smile was warm, almost disarmingly so, as she extended a hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," she said, her tone threaded with sincerity, yet carrying the unmistakable ring of authority. I shook her hand, feeling both the steeliness of her grip and an undercurrent of something unspoken. This was not just any project. It was the project. One that could redefine everything for me in this cutthroat industry. Yet here stood Shannon Murphy, declaring dominion over what I had poured countless hours into. "I'm excited to see what we can achieve together," she continued. Her words were diplomatic, but firm, each syllable calculated to convey control without overt dominance. A knot tightened in my stomach as I realized the landscape of my career might be changing forever around me. Would this be a partnership or another battle for autonomy? My mind raced with possibilities. Was this a genuine alliance or another corporate tug-of-war masked in pleasantries? The path ahead felt uncertain, yet charged with potential. A precipice upon which my professional future balanced delicately. In this game of power and persuasion, could I trust her intentions? As we moved forward into the meeting room, questions lingered in the background like shadows, silently daring me to step forward boldly into whatever awaited next. There are moments in life that define us, and this meeting room was about to become the arena where my silent resolve would finally speak its truth. I sat across from Derek, the air thick with unspoken tension, his self-assured grin a stark contrast to my determined calm. For weeks, I had watched him manipulate and maneuver, his charm masking the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. As the meeting commenced, I let him lead with his usual bravado, detailing his grand vision that promised more than it could ever deliver. The room seemed enthralled, nodding along to the cadence of his voice. But beneath the table, my fingers traced over the edges of my notes, a collection of facts and insights that unraveled his narrative. "So, Cassandra," he finally turned to me, a hint of condescension in his tone. "Do you have anything to add?" I felt every pair of eyes on me as I took a deliberate breath. "Actually, yes," I began evenly. "There are a few points I'd like to clarify." With each word, a new layer of Derek's plan peeled away. Financial projections didn't hold up under scrutiny. Timelines were unrealistic. Risks conveniently overlooked. His smile faltered as I spoke. I could feel the shift in the room's energy. a gradual awakening to truths they hadn't considered before. Inside me surged a mix of fear and exhilaration. Would they see what was so clear to me? The silence weighed heavy when I paused. Derek's face tightened into an expression caught between disbelief and irritation. "Well?" he replied, struggling for composure. "Perhaps those points need further discussion later." But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been sown. I had done it. I had voiced what needed saying, not just for myself, but for everyone who saw but never dared question. This battle was far from over. But for now, I relished this small victory. A crack in Derek's armor. I stood there, a sea of faces stretched out before me, their eyes trained on the speaker at the podium. The room buzzed with an electrifying tension as my name was called out. "Cassandra," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority and respect that had always been just out of my reach. Her reputation for excellence precedes her. It was like hearing someone else's story, not mine, being narrated in a room full of people who might as well have been strangers. My hands instinctively clenched into fists at my sides, a reflexive response to the disbelief that surged through me. But it wasn't just at me. I could feel my family's eyes boring into me from across the room. My parents, seated with carefully composed expressions, were almost statuesque in their stillness. They never expected this. They never saw Cassandra as anything but ordinary. For years, I had endured their subtle dismissals, their casual belittling at family gatherings. "Cassandra? Oh, she's doing fine," they'd say with a shrug when asked about me. Fine, a word that encompassed all things mediocre and unremarkable in our family lexicon. But here I was now, being elevated by voices that had never even known of my existence until today. As the executive continued to laud my contributions and knowledge in front of everyone, my colleagues, high-ranking officials, and yes, even my incredulous family, I felt something shift deep within me. It was as though a heavy veil had lifted, allowing the light to pour through for the first time. What are they thinking now? I wondered silently, daring a glance at them. Were they finally seeing me? Or just the realization that they had underestimated what I could become? I took a breath, letting it fill every inch of my lungs before releasing it slowly. This moment of validation wasn't theirs to claim. It was mine entirely. There are moments in life when time seems to stand still, and the ground beneath your feet feels like it's crumbling away. That was exactly how I felt the moment my father finally admitted what I had longed and feared to hear, that I was his daughter. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the sun lazily filters through half-open curtains, casting stripes of warmth across a room that has seen too many secrets kept within its walls. I sat there across from him, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. His eyes were restless, darting between me and the floor, as if searching for an escape route. He began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something." My pulse quickened at those words, a mixture of dread and hope, coiling tight in my chest. This is it, I thought. This is what you've been waiting for. He looked at me then, really looked at me, as though seeing me for the first time. Something shifted in his gaze, a mix of recognition and regret so profound, it made my breath catch. You're my daughter," he stammered out eventually, each word heavy with years of unspoken truth. A silence fell between us like a thick fog. The admission hung in the air, fragile yet mighty enough to alter everything we knew about our worlds. I watched his face contort with emotions he had buried deep. A whirlwind of surprise mingled with guilt that clung to him like a shadow refusing to let go. My mind raced, caught between the euphoria of being acknowledged and the sting of wondering why now? Why only now? As his words settled into my bones, transforming agony into bittersweet relief, I realized this confession was not just for me. It was his redemption too. And although my heart was bruised by years of denial, in this moment there lay a slender thread of hope, a tentative bridge towards something new. Would he take hold of it and help rebuild what had been shattered? Or would this awkward confession be all there ever was? That decision hung heavily in the silence that followed. The room was silent, a tense quiet that seemed to bust with unspoken words. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, like the ticking of a countdown, as my family sat around me in a semicircle. Each of them wore an expression that I had come to know too well, the practiced indifference that masked years of unresolved conflicts and untold stories. For too long, I had let their narrative define me, letting their skewed perspectives twist and bend the truth until it barely resembled reality. But not anymore. This time, I was here to set the record straight. "I need to talk," I began, my voice stronger than I felt inside. Their eyes snapped to mine with a mix of surprise and apprehension. Perhaps they sensed the change in me, the fire kindling within. "I'm not here for more excuses or apologies," I continued, each word carefully measured. "I'm here for respect. For once, can we speak about the past without rewriting it?" My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, as if expecting this confrontation, but never truly prepared for it. My mother looked at me with those familiar eyes that always seem to see, but never understand. "You've always seen things your way," my brother interjected defensively. I paused for a moment, taking in his words. The old Cassandra might have flinched at this predictable attempt to undermine my resolve, but not today. "No," I replied firmly. "I've seen things as they are, not through the lens of what's convenient or comfortable for everyone else." The room fell silent again. Only this time it was different. There was power in my words now, strength that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. As I stood there demanding respect, rather than revisionism from those who had shaped so much of my world with their tangled truths, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just about changing their perceptions. It was about reclaiming my own story. There was a time when the very thought of my father's approval seemed as distant as the stars. But here I was, standing amidst a gathering that buzzed with warmth and celebration. His presence radiating a pride I had never dared imagine. 6 months had passed since I took those tumultuous steps away from the shadows that had loomed over me for so long. 6 months of relentless work, of proving to myself day after day that I was more than the limitations others had imposed upon me. As the clinking glasses around us subsided and a hush fell over the room, my father stood up, his eyes locked onto mine. There was no mistaking it. Those eyes held something new, something hopeful and proud. He cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "To my daughter," he began, his voice steady, yet imbued with a tenderness I'd rarely heard before. My heart raced. Was this really happening? A part of me feared waking up from this moment. But this was real. It was unfolding right before me. "You faced your challenges head on," he continued. "And you've emerged not only victorious, but stronger." His words wrapped around my heart like a warm embrace. I couldn't help but recall all those days, when I felt invisible in his eyes, when every step forward seemed to push him further away. Yet here we were, on the cusp of a new beginning. He raised his glass high. To her success! The room erupted in cheers and applause as glasses met in joyful concordance. In this single moment, everything changed, every shadow lifted by the light of newfound respect and understanding. As I clinked my glass against his, our strained history softened into something hopeful and new. This wasn't just a toast to success. It was the promise of reconciliation, a bridge across the chasm that once seemed too wide to cross.